gentleman, and I'll come back, Representative Flack.
So from what I'm understanding, it is possible, if we should go with this scenario, that what is now the kitchen area could be this space that could be used again for a kitchen. I know that the cooperative was interested in having the kitchen available, as was the jail. Not the whole thing necessarily.
Yeah, we'd have to understand what, because in their budget in 6, I think I know what you're talking about. You're talking about people coming in for other uses. They have a basic kitchen, like a lunchroom kitchen, in this budget, in there, wherever it lands. In item 6.
I'm talking a preparation kitchen.
That's for them. That's for lunches and basic things. If you were to use that for that, yeah, we'd have to look at that design, because it is a little sprawling the way it currently is, but you could carve out a small space, I'm sure, if you wanted, for that type of use, sure.
Okay. Representative Flack?
Yeah, thank you. ADA bathrooms, are they included in the co-op
They are.
area?
They are. Somewhere in here, our thinking was if this was maintenance and Bob, there's a couple of bathrooms here now, we could convert those for him, for his guys. We would have to create an ADA bathroom somewhere along here for that office space, and that's in these numbers.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
This is also ground level, so where it was a nursing home, ADA is fairly easy to accommodate. We just have to create the bathroom space.
Okay.
What did we miss? The other one, item 11, the new facility, there was a question about a brand-new building. It's a tough one to answer, and the reason is because of, Mark and I talked briefly about cost per foot and that sort of thing on new buildings. I would lean personally very strongly towards renovating and keeping, and the reason is this is a steel frame masonry building. If you put up a metal building like an agricultural type building or a retail store type thing, very simple, you're probably in the $100 or so foot for the basic building. Here you own utilities, services, you've got the generators, feeding sewer, you've got the pellet boiler already in here. So it's not just putting up a building, you're gonna have to accommodate and build over existing because you own all these utilities. If you went and put it somewhere else on site, like just for maintenance, now you're talking a building that's $100 or so, 125. If you replace this building in this kind, membrane roofs, commercial, brick block, the durability that you own, you're going to be much more expensive per foot. I mean, typically we're seeing buildings in the 175 to 200 range of that quality, once you're done. So there are ways, obviously, to save money from a maintenance perspective, but from a general use, office space, that sort of thing, I would lean towards renovation for that cost, and I feel it's more expensive than doing this scenario.
Okay.
In my opinion. So the last item was just a design. Originally, the last one, it caused some confusion, I think, when we spoke, is we didn't have an allowance for design team, whatever we spend for this, whatever options we take. Contingency, equipment considerations, and so forth, which would be anything it costs the owner to build a building. Generally speaking, that would be to hire architects and engineers to do our design, if we're doing a whole office and all that space. It would include a contingency. We'd have to have an asbestos study done. All the same sort of soft cost items we had for the new building, but obviously much, much less. Pretty straightforward. Of those numbers, I think about 50,000 was contingency, if I recall. The rest of it was incidental testing, oversight, and design. So hopefully it doesn't create too much confusion, but that's a whole bunch of options. So.
Thank you, Randy. So the subcommittee had asked that you come back with a building that was less than $1 million, that would meet our needs and allow somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 square feet, unspecified space. You've done exactly what we've asked for. So I want to compliment you on doing that. You're able to save $3 million. Is there a number we can, off the other building, is there a number we could take off here that you'd save us from the start?
I would say probably not at this point.
Thank you very much.
But we'll try.
Thank you. Committee have other questions for Randy before we move on?
I don't have a question for Randy, but I have a general comment if I can.
Okay, hold on, before we come back, yes, and then Representative Babson.
This is another catalog of information question. How many square feet is the boiler room? Is that about 500? What is it? How many square feet is the boiler room?
Which one?
I'm sorry, the pellet boiler room. Sorry, the pellet boiler room. is-
Like I say, 900 to 1,000 would be my best guess. It's about the size of a small classroom, for a school classroom for relative size.
Follow-up?
No, I'm good, thank you. very much.
Representative Babson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concern is with the cost of the cooperative extension. It was my impression we were gonna come in with a cost of under $1 million, and maybe I'm the only one that thought it, but I thought that was gonna include the renovation of the cooperative extension area. Yes, we're not gonna have to pay the rent, but we're gonna have to pay for the renovations on top of that. I would have liked to see a figure that would have included the cooperative extension totally renovated, and it hasn't appeared here.
Well, I'm sorry, never mind. Go ahead.
You've got one, you.
Yeah,
Add
no,
$500,000 to it.
my understanding of what the subcommittee was asking is what we've been presented. I understand your plight and your question, David, and understand that we'd have to take out, presently, we'd have to take out $300,000 or something to accommodate them. Representative Merrill?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, if I were doing this as I wanted to do it, this is not what I do, but considering the fact that the economy's the way it is and I guess I should say the disagreement amongst the different people is what should be done, I think this is a good compromise. And I would buy this, but I'd throw in the caveat that when we do this, that we take that $40,000 and allow them to get a mortgage, a 5-year mortgage, which could be paid off easy to renovate that, pay it with the $40,000, and then at the end of 5 years, we'd be clear. And get the co-op in there.
I'm sorry, I missed your second part. You liked what's been presented of today's economy. What
I
was-
said
what
it's a
was-
good compromise.
Okay, so what was the second part on the
The second
$40,000?
part is,
I missed that.
we're paying $40,000, I believe, now for the co-op for rent.
Okay.
So if we took that $40,000 and let the commissioners get I don't know how much it would cost to rent, but say a 5-year mortgage, certainly would do it. Use that $40,000 for the next 5 years to pay off the mortgage, the co-op would be in there at the end of 5 years, you'd be rent-free,
Thank
and
you,
you'd get the co-op.
thank you. Commissioner Solomon?
I'd like to bring up another point having to do with the wing on the, let me see, get my, wing on the east side. That's one furthest from the nursing home, the new nursing home. I've been delving into a problem that we have here in the county with regard to homeless veterans. I actually saw a veteran standing on the street in Conway, holding a sign saying he was homeless. This has become a serious problem in our area. Since we had, the commissioners, had always assumed or wanted to keep that wing, the east side of the building, I began looking into the possibility of using that wing, those two wings, I should say, as a facility for homeless vets. There are programs out there where monies can be obtained. But let me first put in a caveat here. I don't think that the county necessarily has to operate this facility. And in fact, I would look to some other organization coming in. There's a project going on called Soldier On. And they have monies coming from the Veterans Administration, the federal government, to make or renovate areas to bring in a homeless veterans project. There are 15 similar projects nationally. I was in touch with a gentleman who has put in such a shelter in Boston. Granted, Boston is a whole lot different than we are. I don't underestimate that problem. However, funding such a project could be done, or could possibly be done. What I would ask this committee is to consider not being so gung-ho right now on pushing for the demolition of those two wings, with the, with the understanding that we could possibly use that for some benefit of our community and our veterans. And I would ask that you keep that in mind as I follow through on my project. There is a group, there's a gentleman who is coming once a month, twice a month to the Service Link office to talk with veterans on homelessness. I have to meet with him. He's only started this project. He left early, so I didn't get to see him last week. He won't be back until next week. I am also going to a meeting, veterans meeting up in the Gorham area next month to speak, to listen to people speak on this very same idea of supporting the homeless vets here in our county. And I would ask you to please keep that in mind before you go ahead and condemn that piece of property that may very well be useful to our veterans.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Look forward to see what you find out.
Let's ask this question.
Yeah, because
Okay. If you only demoed the one wing, okay? And what would that require to isolate the second wing? What would be required to isolate the second wing? How much additional cost would we incur to isolate the second wing?
It's not so much additional cost as that I'd hate to see you spend money. I'd almost prefer that you held demoing all of it until you did that. Only because if you take off pieces, you start doing that wall infill. And if you start doing that wall infill, you should do it permanently as opposed to temporarily. Or, again, if it was me, I would either demo nothing or I would demo some chunk permanently, whatever that chunk is, if you will. The problem with taking one wing off is what you're doing is you're relocating that wall infill situation. And if you later decide to take it down because that doesn't come through or a need doesn't come through, you run the risk of demoing something you just built, if that makes sense.
So we could progress with the core from that wall back
Yes.
and not do the demolition at this time?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And
I don't think there's anything, other than the expense of your, ongoing utilities, there would be nothing that comes to mind that would be an issue there. You could create that infill, if you will, whatever it might be in the future. Yes, you could do that.
so, if,
Right.
okay, how long would it take to do the inside of the building?
Well, it depends on what we do, but
Well, assuming-
let's say you did a whole package, you did the co-op renovation and everything, you're talking about a construction time of less than 6 months, which you've got to do. You'd probably spend a few months up front in design, working with a committee, getting it nailed down and out to bid. So say less than a year for everything, design, turnkey, occupied.
Okay, so a fair statement in relationship to Commissioner Solomon's comments would be that if this can be arranged in the next 6 months,
Yeah, I think we could.
that you could then make all I'm saying is I hate to have you come back.
If you wanted to move forward, there's ways to put caveats on it or whatever. You could design and prepare this component. These components really cost you nothing except, should they ultimately be demoed, you just want to be thinking, Jim made a good point, you just want to think about the flow to and from this building should this not exist and vice versa. Not a big deal, it's just something that has to be thought through in the design process, that's all. But I don't think there's any cost associated necessarily with that. You could pull that demolition money away temporarily.
If I could follow up.
Yes.
My only comment on that is that I would not like this to sit around for the next 5 years, okay?
We've been talking about it for a while.
Yeah, I know they have. And so, to me, there needs to be a timeline for that. And my comment would be that if you think it would take roughly 6 months to do the inside, then instead of doing the demolition first, you could do the demolition second.
Or even during.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, this is pretty much independent of this, except for cutting off utilities. This can happen simultaneously, before or after. There's really there's no saying as to when you have to do that. It doesn't interrupt. If you elected to take some of these choices and do them, you can go ahead and do them, and you can pick to demo that whenever you want. It's just the impact of those dollars should it come later, that's all. You just have to consider the cost.
And we have how many years to spend the money? How many
The
years left?
leftover money? 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank
How's
you.
that? I'm not coming back to you, I have the list here. So I guess from that conversation, Commissioner Solomon, a contract in hand and in 6 months' time would be the cleanest proposal for the delegation. Representative Babson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Umbrick, just for clarity, when you say a wing, you're talking about the two on one side or the two on the other, not...
Right, not just one.
Not four wings.
Right. Commissioner Solomon indicated, if I might,
Please.
indicated that it was,
A wing, she said.
yeah.
That's just
No, I meant the
52
side.
yeah,
Aside.
she
Aside,
said the
okay.
side.
Two.
Okay, so it's, whatever, 2 wings.
Okay, Representative Merrill?
Yeah, I'd like to go back to Commissioner Solomon for a minute. I guess particularly as a veteran, there's nobody any more concerned about homeless veterans than I am, but I'm a little bit concerned when you say one was standing on the street corner in Conway, if that's enough to designate a wing for them, and if we take money from the government, they're probably gonna have a lot of caveats with it, but what I would like you to do, now as an Ossipee selectman, I can tell you, to the best of my knowledge, we don't have a homeless vet in Ossipee. Occasionally, we have somebody who's homeless come in and we send them to a shelter, but not very often, but to the best of my knowledge, none of these have been
Veterans.
really veterans. You may have a problem up there, because I know your welfare budget's about 5 times as much as the town of Ospreys are, so you may have a bigger problem in Conway, but I would like somebody to survey the county and find out just exactly how many homeless vets there are before we do this.
Excuse me, Commissioner Solomon?
The assumption is that there are, let's see, what is this? That there are something like 650 homeless vets, though it is believed to be double that
In the county?
in the state.
The state.
In the state?
In the state.
Yeah, but I'd like to...
I understand what you're saying.
I'd like to know how many there are in the county and on what the assumption is made.
Let me just point out one other point of information. And I don't know how this necessarily works for the Veterans Administration, but my question, a recent question that I had for Jason Johnson was how many of our incarcerated inmates who come out were veterans, and how many came out homeless. He said there were a few. I couldn't give you a number on that. But then, I don't know how the Veterans Administration looks at, once you've been incarcerated, whether you're no longer eligible for veterans care, and I don't know.
The other thing that bothers me a little bit on the statistics, and this is not veterans, but in general, and you're considered if you're 20, 21 years old, and you're living with your parents, you're considered homeless.
Right.
I don't happen to consider that being homeless.
I understand.
And I'd just like to know how these figures work out.
Okay, thank you. I Representative Merrill, the scope of the project and how I believe the delegation views this, that if this turned out to be a tremendous idea, and before they could receive monies, they'd have to figure out the scope and how many people they're going to serve and whether it
Absolutely.
made sense. I would view anything like this as a standalone project,
Absolutely.
that if there were renovation costs, administration, anything else, it's a standalone building, it's off to the side, and those costs would have to be figured, and they would have to pay the price.
I
So,
think that figures with what Representative Umberger just said in making it.
Yes. Representative McCarthy?
Yes, I think you all know that I spent a lifetime in the military, and there's nobody in this room, or probably in this state or even this country, that has more feelings for veterans than I do. But I've been a member of the Veterans Affairs Committee in Concord since I've been elected. I'm also on the Post-Traumatic Stress Syndrome Committee. I'm on the Traumatic Brain Injury Committee for Veterans. I've been the commander of the American Legion in North Conway for over 10 years. We tried to open a home for homeless veterans, and in 6 months we got 0. I believe, although I appreciate the concern of the commissioner, I believe that the concern is much exaggerated.
Thank you. Question for the commissioners, if I could. For maintenance, presently operating out of 500 plus or minus in the old building, the old nursing home. And we're looking at going to 2,000 plus in the new structure if we were to adopt the plan brought to us by was just represented. What space are we going to free up in other buildings, and what's your intent with that freed up space, and where are the commissioners viewing that being used? I know there's a couple. There's a couple office there's a couple of storage trailers that are presently being used. Is maintenance, if we were to house them in one location and we were to provide the space that we're talking about, is there any other building space anywhere that would be freed up that we could use for some other purpose in the county?
The cement block building where the generator is located, that would be vacated, and that would be a place where the farm would store lawn equipment and that kind of thing, tools in there. That would probably be the only space that would be freed up, and that would be used for that purpose. Because we're planning on taking down, I think you toured the building we want to take down where the animals were kept. It's a dangerous building. It's ready to fall in. We want to take that down. That's where the present lawnmowers and outdoor equipment stuff is stored. So that would be moved over to this cement block building.
And how large a space is this cement block building, square feet?
Might be on that.
I don't know, probably,
It's actually on that site plan to the far left. The upper part of the plan, I can't imagine it's more than 400 or 500, Mike. What's this little building right here? This was the old jail that was torn down, and it's that building right back there.
yeah.
Just off to the left. I would guess it's 25 by 25 at the most, something like that.
Roof's good on it and so forth?
I haven't actually looked at it. I think it's a masonry
Well, we
building.
don't
It's a
want you
masonry
to go over
building.
there and look at it.
Yeah.
If you have it, if you'd like.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that.
Mr.
And on top,
$27 a square foot to put a roof on.
yeah, on top of that space, you have two storage
Good one for
trailers.
the prisoners.
And what would you do with those? You own those, don't you?
Yeah,
County
I
owns
think
those?
we'd try to sell them or get them out of there.
And last thing, have you made any movement forward on putting together that list of space and square foot requirements that the
Yes,
county owns now?
That's what Will is working on. Yep.
Sounds great, thank you.
Could I make
Yes.
a comment? I think you ought to pay attention to the exclusions down the bottom of the page, because I don't believe that the architectural or structural design fees are included in that top. That's going to be extra.
Well, they are as long as we pick item 12. Right. They're not in the individual estimates, those are construction only, but just for clarity, as long as you add item 12 to any scenario, you've got design covered.
So then that's in all the inclusion,
It wasn't in the individual choices, but as you get to item 12 on the cover sheet, page 2, that then rounds it out for you by giving you a package.
So all those bottom items are included in that 125,000?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Makes it, I think, we didn't do that last time, and I think it makes it a lot simpler if it's a package.
Sounds good. Representative, could I just finish mine here first?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Presently, the office space that we're renting for the co-op up in Conway,
Yeah.
how many square foot are we presently renting for them?
You know what that is?
I believe it's about 4,500 feet.
4,500 square feet, and
Yes.
has that been broken out as to what we're paying, or what they're paying for rent up there per square foot?
My
$12 a
understanding was
square foot.
30,000, because 10,000 was for utilities, plowing, janitor, that kind of
Electricity,
thing,
utilities,
utilities.
yep.
So it's $30,000 that we're paying for actual space.
I think that was Mark's figure, as a matter of fact. I think that was the chairman's figure, as a matter of fact,
Okay.
30,000.
Okay. Discussion on that point?
No, I was trying to confirm that 40,000 was partial rent, partial utilities, so.
I think it's everything, with utilities, with trash, and it might even be plowing, but it's more than just rent.
Yeah.
It does everything.
Okay. Representative McCarthy?
Yeah, I'd just like to interject a little food for thought. I would be very happy if we could talk the commissioners into hiring a purchasing agent for the county. I think it would save the county a great deal of money, rather than spending money on moving the co-op down here. It's not required, not necessary, and there's no reason for it. But the dining room area, if we did have a purchasing agent, he would buy a myriad of different articles in bulk, and he would need some place for storage. And I think that dining room area would be the perfect location for the storage and the office of a purchasing agent for the county.
Thank you, Representative.
I would agree 100%.
Representative Umberger?
Yes. I need some help on the laundry.
Want me to fold or wash?
Both. Actually, my husband's home doing the laundry, which I appreciate. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. That's okay, but he does a fine job, and I truly appreciate it. But that's probably more than people needed to know. But does the 100,000 include new equipment, or is that in addition to?
It would be in addition to, but I think that, according to Bob, and I'm putting words in his mouth, there was gonna be some swapping of equipment. I think your equipment's in reasonable shape, and there was a new piece of equipment that was over at the jail that apparently is not being used as effectively as it might be. And the thinking was to bring that over. It was gonna be adding, I think all he was doing was adding a washer, adding a small extractor. And I think the drying capacity you have is adequate, and as far as quantity, right? Yes?
He was moving a dryer or an extractor.
He was trading some equipment, but he did not have a significant equipment cost at all. It was more swapping and trading with things you own.
So the 100,000 is for revamping the,
We were gonna actually take the floor right out in order to repipe and move things where it needs to be. Repipe all your equipment, new exhaust through the roof, basically freshen the room right up, I guess if you will. Using existing equipment. Honestly, in that 100, there could potentially be a little bit of room there for a piece of equipment if they needed it, because that is a little bit of a dart, but I think it's a realistic number for doing that room over. But the final design would determine that once we get everybody on board and a direction chosen.
Commissioner Sorensen?
I inspected the jail on Monday and came to the conclusion with those people over there, they are using all that equipment 5 days a week for personal laundry within the nursing home, within the jail. So none of that equipment would be traded over for this laundry.
Okay. Last I heard from Bob, they were trading. Larger for
Excuse me?
smaller. They were
No.
swapping, I thought they were gonna swap washers, larger for smaller. There was something going on there that
Bob would know better.
he
Yeah.
spoke about.
Yeah.
That's what they
Whatever.
said early on, they were
Yeah.
gonna take the smaller
They
one
did,
somewhere. and
exactly.
swap
So
it
that
with the
may
bigger one.
change.
Yeah.
We do have a contingency in the budget for a piece of equipment, should we need that, in that budget. But that-
Representative Flack?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for the commissioners, and it's more or less a follow-up to what Commissioner Solomon had suggested earlier. Has there been any discussion with any other state agencies with the possibility of coming in as renters or occupants in any of the buildings? And I wonder if not, Why not, and if that's a possibility?